Hello and welcome to Artful Loving. In this episode we're going to talk about getting kinky, bringing some kink into our relationship, how to do that, what that looks like, and how we can navigate exploring the areas of kink in a way that feels right for us. So stick around. Hi there, I'm Nick Tovey, relationships and intimacy counselor, coach, educator, and author of the book, The Revolutionary Man. Thanks for being with us today on Artful Loving. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to make sure that you're notified when new videos come your way. This is a big conversation and I'd really love you to be involved in it. If you want to find out more about myself and my work, you can go and visit my website, nicktovey.com. So what do we mean when we're talking about and exploring the world of kink? Kink, in my view, is an umbrella term that encompasses many different aspects of sexuality and sexual exploration, and from BDSM, which is bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, and sadism and masochism. So that is a particular area of kink. It can include fetishes, things like having a particular fetish around a certain clothing or a certain part of the body or a certain activity, like a foot fetish or a dog, dressing up as a dog, or cosplay sort of fetishes. These are all different ways in which we can explore arousal, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a sexual experience. And a lot of the experience, as we'll get into this conversation, you'll discover a lot of the experiences of kink aren't necessarily sexual, don't necessarily involve genital touch or genital to genital exploration. Yeah, so it's an interesting area, but what they do all incorporate is arousal, is that experience of feeling a certain level of arousal, excitement, all of the things that go on in our body and our mind and our brain to bring that sense of arousal. So let's dive into it a little more. So up until fairly recently, any behaviors that involved sadism and masochism and potential pain and things like that, typical BDSM behaviors and fetishes, they were very much pathologized and seen as a psychological pathology. And not so long ago, people would have been institutionalized for having such interests and behaviors. And so I think it's a good thing that we've moved a little bit beyond that, and to the point where today the areas of kink, BDSM, fetish has become much more mainstream, thanks to a particular book series that we don't need to talk about too much. But you know, actually no, let's talk about it. I find this a fascinating phenomenon. In fact, the 50 Shades phenomenon. I think what this shows us, what the popularity of this book, and of course the movie to follow, what this phenomenon showed us was the great deal of interest into this part of sexuality and this experience and expression of sexuality, particularly from women. Yeah, from I would say the vast majority of people that engaged with that material were heterosexual women of probably between 30 and 50 years of age, so more middle-aged women. And of course I'm generalizing there. Of course there's it was interesting to a lot of people, but what I find fascinating about this is that that's clearly an area of sexual exploration that these particular people were hungry for and interested in, and so put aside their need for quality literature and then really engaged with a book that didn't necessarily win any amazing literary prizes, but it was extremely popular. Yeah, it sold a lot of books, and so there's reason for that. There's a reason for that. What it has done for the kink world, I suppose, and the BDSM world, has brought it out of the shadows and more into the mainstream. Of course, it's not a new phenomenon. It's been around for centuries, and if not millennia, and since we've had experiences of sexuality. But what I think is particularly prominent today is the fact that the whole BDSM and kink industry received a massive influx of popularity and interest as a result of these particular books and movies, and that's a good thing. And of course, there's always a shadow element to this, so it's important to have these conversations and to really dive into it, to dispel any myths and any misunderstandings that can come from this sort of media, and of course the popular conversations and ideas and explorations around BDSM and kink. There's of course a lot that can go wrong, so it's really, really important that we educate ourselves and we get a bit of understanding around how to play, what play can look like, how do we navigate experiences of kink and BDSM, particularly important when we've got any sort of bondage or potential pain involved, because of course we can get hurt, and we can hurt people and we can cause all sorts of trauma. So it's really, really important that if we do want to navigate, if we do want to dive into this area, we do it safely, we do it with some due diligence, some education, some understanding, and we do it with somebody who we trust. Really, really important. So the areas of kink as an umbrella, of course, encompasses so many different things, and when we're talking about BDSM or power play or any of those experiences, there's a spectrum that we can explore, from playing with some light sensation touch or some light putting a blindfold on, taking away the experiences of sight. That's kink, that is delving into an experience where one person has power over the other in some degree, and we'll talk a bit more about how we navigate that in a minute. So that's a very light experience that of course is going to give a sense of excitement, of anticipation, possibly a little bit of fear, which of course makes it exciting if it's done well, if it's consensual. And then, of course, we can go to the other extreme where we're having extreme levels of pain and sensation play or power play, to the point where we have master-slave relationships that can be 24/7 arrangements between one person who's in the master position, one person who's in the submissive slave position, and that is a lifestyle that a lot of people live. It may not be for you, but that's okay. Where do you fit along this spectrum? What do you want to explore along this spectrum? When we're talking about fetishes are, of course, can become a little taboo. It's an area of our life that we often keep secret, that we don't share with people openly, and so there can be potential for a lot of shame and confusion around how to navigate a particular fetish. So again, it's really, really important that when we are sharing this fetish with somebody, we're doing it with somebody who understands, who gets it, who we can trust and we feel safe with. So it's important to take those considerations into fact. There are, of course, communities that love this shit. There are communities where we can go and everything that you bring to the community is going to be welcome. That may not necessarily be your kind of people, but it may be something worth trying. Yeah, I think particularly every major city is going to have a community, or possibly several communities, that draw towards them people that are interested in this level of sexuality and sexual exploration. So if that's something you want to dive into, whether you're a single person or as a couple, you can explore these things. Yeah, there are people that you can learn from, and of course, Google's your friend. Go and do it. Go and search for your communities. Of course, one of the most important aspects of any relationship, but it gets particularly much more important when we're dealing with kink, is communication, is boundaries and agreements, yeah, and consent. So whenever we're engaging in any sort of play that involves power, that involves sensation, that involves any potential of an experience becoming potentially dangerous or harmful, it's super important that we communicate really well. In fact, in my experience, this subculture, if you like, the kink world, has been a world in which I've learned a lot about communication, boundaries, and consent. I've had experiences with people that I've been engaged with where the level of communication prior to any scene being played out, any experience being had, the level of communication is extremely clear and concise and to the point, to recognize, okay, what are you into, what don't you like, what are your yeses, what are your nos, what are your maybes. These are the conversations that are so important when we're engaging in anything like this, because of course everybody's different. We don't want to make any assumptions. We don't want to move into an experience where we're unclear about something, whether we should do something or shouldn't do something. We want to make these things really clear. So then we can enter into the experience having full freedom to know, okay, here are the boundaries. Let's play within these boundaries, and I know in that situation that I'm not going to do anything that this person's not okay with. Of course, we can be in the middle of an experience and that person can say, okay, stop, or use a safe word, or put a pause in, or just have a, need a moment. So boundaries, of course, can be put in place after we've made agreements to it, but ultimately it's so important that when we enter into that experience, that clarity has been gained. So of course, communication is really important when we're delving into this area of sexual play. One of the overarching themes of kink is power. There's often, in fact, in all situations of sexual play and or any sort of scenes, when we're talking about kink, BDSM, fetish, there's always a dynamic of power. One is in a more submissive posture, one is in more of a dominant posture. And of course, this can change, this can swap, this can flip-flop, but it's usually the case that one person is more comfortable or more gets off on being either the submissive or the dominant, and that's not always the case. Yeah, some people are good at switching, some people enjoy the experiences of being in both, and in fact, in my point of view, in my experience and my perspective, I think it's really important that we do experience both sides of that coin. In fact, I would be hesitant to be, if I was a submissive and I was wanting to interact with somebody who was a dominant, I would be hesitant to interact with that person if I knew that they were always in the dominant posture and they didn't allow themselves to flip over into a submissive posture in certain circumstances with certain people. I think it's really important that if you're oriented towards more of a dominant posture or a submissive posture, in order to really get the skills that you need and to have this level of sensitivity and understanding so you can do doming or subbing well, it's really important that you get a good taste and a good experience of the other side of that dynamic. So that's something to consider. If you're somebody who you feel would orient more towards the dominant position or the submissive position, give yourself opportunities in the right context with the right people to explore the other side of the dynamic. It may not be your preferred place, but there's always going to be something there for you. And it may be that delving into that place that may be a little less comfortable for you is actually really, really enjoyable and you get something out of. At the very least, you're at least going to get that experience of what it's like to be on the other side of your doming or your subbing. Something that I think is really important to bring some clarity to is the idea of doming and subbing being something of oppression, an experience of oppression. Of course it can be, yeah? It can be quite harmful to have somebody in an experience who is extremely dominant in an aggressive and harmful way that's not consensual. This is the really, really important point, is whatever we're engaging in any sort of kink play is consensual. If it's not, we've moved into a very different area of experience, and that's not okay. Yeah, if anything that is happening in your scene or your experience with this person that you haven't you haven't arranged a prior agreement to, it's not within the boundaries, it's outside of consent, you need to put a stop to that. That person is not doing the right thing by you, and they're not somebody who should be trusted in that dynamic. So it's really, really important to call that and to get out of that situation and to call that person to account. We can have a hell of a lot of fun doing this, yeah? It's a beautiful experience to be in these dynamic power plays and have these experiences of sensation and sexual expression. And of course, we're moving into territory that can be potentially harmful, and anything that's out of the realms of feeling good and safe and comfortable, we need to address. We really need to hold people to account in this. So if you're somebody who's in a submissive posture, if you're the submissive in a particular experience or scene, then you're the one who's calling the shots, essentially. Yeah. So there's a lot of misconception around the idea of being submissive as that you're the one having power over you. That might be the case once the scene has started, but ultimately you're the one in the submissive position setting the parameters of your experience. Yeah. So you're the one telling this person that you're engaging with, who's going to be in the dominant posture, you're the one saying, this is okay, this is okay, this is not okay. Check in with me before you do this. Only hit me to this level. Only use a flogger to this level. I'll let you know when it's too much. Yeah. So as a dominant, you should always be checking in with a person to make sure they're okay and that you're working within their levels of comfort, particularly if we're using impact and pain and sensation. It's really important to understand that as the submissive, you're the one calling the shot. So who really has the power? Yeah, this is a really interesting aspect of this level of power play, which I think often gets misunderstood. And from the outside looking in, it can look like that person in a submissive posture is actually being abused or hurt or having some experience that they're not okay with. It's really not the case. At least it shouldn't be. Yeah, and this is why it's really important that we're working with people, we're engaging with people that we trust. So what are some of the ways in which we can engage with a bit of kink? I think one very common experience and very enjoyable experience is to experience sensation, yeah, a range of sensations. So this is what we call sensation play, yeah. So there's, of course, so many. Our body is a sensory object, and we can experience so many different sensations with the body, from tickling to pain to temperature experiences, to, and you know, the possibilities are endless almost, yeah. So when we're engaging in any sort of sensation play, what we want to have is a range of different sensations. What a beautiful experience is if you're the person receiving the sensation, so you're the sub in this experience. It's good to have, what makes this exciting is a level of intensity and a level of anticipation. So not knowing what's coming, when, where it's coming, that makes it really exciting. So what we can do in that experience is cover the eyes, use a blindfold, potentially use earplugs, so we take away the experience of sound. Sometimes a little bit of restraint can be good as well, so it takes away our ability to move, whether that's done with ropes or handcuffs or any sort of St. Andrew's cross sort of experience where we're tethered or chained to a wooden structure, or a bed or something like that. So our ability to move, so our level of control gets gradually taken away by this experience. Yeah, and of course we've agreed to this. We've established the parameters and the boundaries of how we're going to play, and we've agreed on maybe a safe word before we start to engage, or we've agreed on one system that I really like is a traffic light system. So it's green, amber, red. Green is good to go, amber is take it a little slowly, red is too much. Yeah. And in that red, we may just need a break. We may just need a pause. So it's good to have these agreements pre-arranged, so we know how to communicate in the moment. Because sometimes, if you're deep in an experience of being submissive, in a submissive in a sensation play or restraint play, you can start to enter into an altered state of consciousness, which makes it a little harder to communicate. Yeah, so it's good sometimes to have maybe a hand signal if your hand is movable. Yeah, and seeable by the person in the other in the dominant position. So sensation play, that can be something as light as a tickle. Yeah, and of course it can be a spank. It could be using sharp objects, obviously in a safe manner. Yeah, there's little things like pinwheels that, like a wheel with sharp pins that we roll against the skin. It's a beautiful experience, but it's also quite intense. It can be using floggers or certain whips. Again, we need to know how we're using these things, because it's definitely possible to really hurt somebody with a flogger or a whip, particularly single-tailed whips. They're extremely dangerous, so don't go practicing with one of them on a person. Yeah, it's good to get some training on that, on the use of those things before you start taking it to somebody's body. Yeah, with a flogger, we could start very light and then sort of increase the intensity with communication with the person who's receiving, to get some input as to their level of capacity to hold that level of pain. Yeah, so we can use a scale of 0 to 10. 0's I can hardly feel it. 10 is way too much. Yeah, so we don't want to get to 10. If we want to play with intensity, maybe 7 or 8 is good. But having a variety of sensation and intensity is what makes it really, really interesting, really exciting. Again, like I said, if we've got our eyes covered and our ears plugged, we don't know what's coming. We can't hear it. temperature is also really fun to play with. So whether that's using metal objects that are cold on the person's skin, or a bit of ice, or something heated like a hot spoon, you know, put a spoon in hot water and use that on the body. Obviously doing it safely, so we're not going to hurt. We want to hurt to the right level, yeah? So we don't want to cause blisters, we don't want to cause harm, we don't want to break skin unless that's exactly what the other person wants. Again, the possibilities are endless. Some people like to play with electrical shocks. There are certain tools we can use that send electric shocks into a person's body. Minor, like small electric shocks, not enough to cause any harm, but definitely enough to cause a lot of sensation. Some people like to play with needles and sharp objects that do actually break the skin. Yeah, so this, and of course, doing that sort of thing, we need to know what we're doing. So it's definitely not a beginner's practice. That's more of the advanced level. A lot of the excitement and arousal that comes with kink is psychological. It's not necessarily the physical experience and the sensation. Of course, those can be beautiful, but what makes those sensations arousing is often the psychology of it. Yeah. So, like I said, if we take away our ability to see and hear and move, that sparks psychology. It creates fear, it creates intensity of emotion, and these are the things that make it really, really exciting. Yeah. Sometimes having the experience where there is no physical interaction between somebody, but somebody's still in the dominant position, and they're what we call mind fucking the other person. Yeah. So this is where we can use intellect to dominate somebody, whether it's through words, whether it's through lack of words, whether it's through, you know, ordering somebody about, having them be your slave for a moment. So these are all different ways in which we can interact and play with power. Yeah. The only limitation is our imagination when it comes to this. And of course, and I'm going to keep coming back to it because it's so, so important. Do our boundary check our agreements, communicate really, really well before we go into anything. Do it with somebody you trust. And of course, if you don't feel a level of trust and your intuition is a little off, you're feeling a little sense of something doesn't feel quite right here, listen to that. Yeah, really take heed. There's probably good reason that you're feeling that. So, you know, back off, back away from that experience. Don't go any further. Of course, kink gives us the opportunity to explore our fantasies. Often fantasy play comes into kink. I've used the word a couple of times now, the word scene. Yeah, this is the experience where two people that are wanting to engage in an experience together, they create a scene. It's very much like creating a scene in a play, where we have two characters that are playing certain roles in this particular scene, and so it's important that we know what those roles are, and that we have had the deep conversations around what this scene is going to look like, what we're going to experience, what is okay to experience, what's not okay to experience, how long we're going to go for if we've got any time constraints. So these are really, really beautiful experiences to have, and it gives us the opportunity to explore some of our fantasies that we may not necessarily want to explore in a real-time experience. Yeah, a very common fantasy for a lot of people is a rape fantasy, yeah, where we have the experience of being heavily dominated and heavily wanted and desired in a way that is potentially forceful and aggressive, and of course we don't want to go through that experience in a real time experience. It may be that this has been an experience that you've had where you haven't had any power, so this can be a way in which you can explore, like revisit the experience whilst having power. And like I said previously, if you're in the submissive position, you're really the one in power here, yeah? Because you're creating the scene. The scene is all about you and your experience. Of course, the person in the dominant position is going to enjoy themselves too, but it's really about you and your experience and the parameters in which you're okay to play. So this gives us a beautiful, safe, an enjoyable way to explore some of these fantasies, whatever the fantasies can be. Surgical fantasies, massage fantasies, all of these things. A lot of people play with masks and leather or latex, where we're covered and we can't tell who this person is. You know, these are where we start to play with some of our fetishes and our fantasies and bring them into scenes and experiences that give us the opportunity to really dive into the depths, and sometimes the really dark depths of our sexuality. But we're doing it in a really beautiful, safe and exploratory way. So this gives us the opportunity to dive into these dark nether recesses of our psyche in a way that is that owns them, that takes accountability for them, gives them some freedom of expression, so they're not just hidden in the shadows of our mind, and which can then of course potentially come out in insidious and potentially harmful ways if we don't address them, if we deny them. Yeah, so this is really a beautiful psychological tool in a lot of ways to explore the nether recesses of our mind and our psyche and our fantasies, particularly when they're a little dark and twisted and not going to be very well accepted by the mainstream world. And you know, we can't behave that way. Some of our behaviors that are fantasies aren't acceptable in normal life. So this gives us a way to play with it with people that are totally okay playing with it. Yeah, so it's a beautiful way to experience our sexuality. So of course, kink can be a beautiful tool to bring into a relationship that maybe just needs a little bit of an injection of passion into the sex life, into the bedroom. Yeah, so it can be a beautiful way for a couple to add a little spark to their sex and to really start to explore some unexplored territory in their sexual lives together and individually. So I really can't recommend it enough. And of course, like I said, it's not for everyone, but remember, there's a whole spectrum. So you can play right down the more light end of it and just experience what it feels like. You know, I think it's like I said before, it's a very common desire to have these levels of experience, and it really works for a lot of people. So if you've got some hang-ups about it, that's okay. Yeah, if you've got some fears about it, that's also okay. In fact, it's probably not a bad thing. But it doesn't mean we don't explore, we don't tiptoe into these areas, and to do it tentatively, to do it with some awareness, with some consciousness, and always really good idea to get some guidance, to get some tuition. So seek out in your area if there is a dungeon or a kink or BDSM center, school. There are plenty around. There are plenty of people that teach this stuff. Yeah, if you want, obviously, you know, this is something I can support you in as well. If you wanted to work with me as a couple or one-on-one, I'm definitely open to doing that. Anyway, I really hope this has been useful, informative, has sparked a few ideas for you, and yeah, go take this into your experience, into your mind, and maybe initially just start to wonder in yourself, what do you want to experience? Where do you want to play your edges and step a little bit beyond your comfort zone? And how can you spark some excitement and newness and novelty into your relationship? Play with it, enjoy it, And of course, if you're new to the channel, go ahead, do the subscribe thing. If you've got any questions, any comments you want to share with me, any feedback, please put it in the comments below. If you want to get in touch with me, send me an email. There's my email address. If you want to engage with me one-on-one or as a couple, go to the website. Contact me through the email or the contact page on the website. I'd love to engage with you. Thanks so much for being here. Enjoy and keep loving.